Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. This is the Story Darlings podcast, and my name's Sandra.
And I'm Tara.
And today we are doing a follow-up to one of my favorite episodes that we've done recently, which is the Apple TV Mr. Corman show, which was directed and written by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, as we know. They recently came out with the series breaking news alert, finale on Friday, and we both watched it, and so we just wanted to share some final thoughts on how that wrapped up and just muse about what the implications of that really means when a series, especially one that has such heavy themes as this one, doesn't get renewed for a second season. Just what it means in the bigger picture. But before we get into that, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Not doing a whole lot new though. So, I watched the final episode of Mr. Corman. How about that, guys? But other than that, not doing too much new.
Yeah, same here. I feel like week to week, we just really don't have big updates to share. I don't know. When's life going to get exciting again?
I know. At some point, we're going to be able to go out and do things, right?
I would like to see you at some point. It's been, I did see you this year. You stopped over randomly, and then not too far back, like we had a little girls' evening in Bentonville at the square.
Which was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your work trip, but it was a work trip.
Yeah. And I had already gotten my food in my hotel room, so I was eating by myself, and then
I ate by myself when we went out for drinks. And I was,
Hey, I had a drink, so
yeah, but you didn't like it. You had some kind of sangria. What was it?
Yeah, it was okay. It was just very sour-ish, I guess.
But didn't we used to drink amaretto sours during college?
I feel like those are more sweet than sour.
Yeah, fine. Speaking of sweet and sours, what's your sour first?
So my sour is, I've just been a little worn down. I feel like I need more sleep and don't have enough time, and just tired.
I hear you.
But my sweet is, I got lovely little pictures for my kids from school, so I'm gonna try and hold these up and still be able to see them as well.
Okay,
so
for the listeners on the podcast, Tara's holding up a picture of her oldest child, Carly, and she is adorable.
And then here is Michael's pictures.
Aww.
And so we just got cute little pictures, and they're growing up so fast and changing so much in between these pictures. It's Carly looks like she's way older than she is, and Michael's little dimple comes out. He has one dimple that's really deep, and I have the same little dimple, and so it's really cute to see it in him.
You made some cute kids, Tara.
Yeah, they make up for their demonness by being cute, right?
It doesn't balance out all of that, but
they have their moments where I'm like, you were just being so cute.
They all do.
So, yeah.
So that's a sweet.
Yep. So what about you?
Sour, same. I haven't been sleeping well. I think I mentioned that last time. And it's and because I haven't been sleeping well, I don't feel like my mind is super sharp. I have trouble remembering things, and I'm getting a lot of headaches, and I feel like my hearing is something. First off, over the last couple of years, I feel like something's happening with my hearing. My ears are constantly popping, and I don't know if it's anxiety or what, but I constantly hear my blood pressure just in my ears. I constantly hear it threshing. I don't know if it's sleep deprivation or anxiety or what the deal is, but it's I hear it constantly, and it's especially bad at night when I'm just lying in bed trying to sleep.
You notice it?
Yes. I'm just am I about to have a stroke? What is going on? Yeah. Your mind just goes worst case scenario. You know,
It's like
I hate it.
WebMD.
Oh my God. Stay away from it. Yeah. So that's my sour, kind of same page with you. Sweet. I'm all caught up on Infinite Jest, I guess, on that reading.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's like
I'm not
3
behind.
weeks worth of behind.
I know. I
So
know. I actually got caught up on that. So I'm back on schedule for December finish. So that's good.
is
I'll take it.
is that why you're sleep deprived? You've been staying up too late to read
Yeah,
the book?
No.
No, you haven't put that
Some
much
other
work into
reasons. No.
it. So do
Yeah.
you want to introduce the topic today? Because I know you
Yeah.
are very
You know
opinionated
me.
about this topic.
I know. It's like the thing I love talking with you each week about is like we have such differing tastes on what we choose to listen to or watch in our free time. So it's like you like the escapism aspect to not have to worry about the
Mhm.
stresses and stuff, which I totally understand. And then me, I like to just soak and simmer and just cook in my emotions and process it however long. And if that makes me miserable, I'll take it. So I think that's why I'm drawn to shows like this. But it's, Mr. Corman, as I mentioned, they had what we thought was going to be the season finale. It kind of felt like it could have gone either way with whether there was a season after it with how it ended. But yesterday or the other day on Twitter, Joseph Gordon-Levitt announced that this is the tweet. I'm going to read it. So, Mr. Corman won't be coming back for season 2. It's meant so much to me to hear from you all who connected with the show, those who felt good, felt sad, felt challenged, felt seen, felt small and meaningless, or felt big, warm, and delicious. Thanks for watching. And it was just like he tweeted this and I saw it and I got so sad because I really wanted to see where he was going with all of these characters. Like I got
Mhm.
emotionally attached to everyone. I mean, from Josh to Victor to seeing if anything happened with his ex Megan to even the parents, like how all of that conflict was going to resolve.
Mhm.
And then to say it wasn't going to be renewed, which I don't know. It says something about society's tastes and what they're interested in or not interested in, maybe, as a popular type
Mhm.
of opinion. But after watching the final episode, what did you think? And just quick warning here. Obviously, this is a follow-up episode. There's tons of spoilers. If you haven't seen the series yet,
Yeah.
go watch it on Apple TV. But yeah.
And if you want to see the tweet by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, we have retweeted it on our Twitter. So
Yeah.
at Story Darlings, you can see it
Or
there too if you don't
or
want to look for
yeah.
him, or you can just look for him whichever way you want. But
He is Hit Record Joe, which is his company. Yeah.
yeah. But I don't know. In the last episode of our podcast, when we talked about him and this show, like I had some negative feelings about Josh, and I know me and Sandra disagree on this if you just saw her face on YouTube, but this episode, I don't know, I felt like he grew so much. Like my problem with him in the episodes previous to this was that he seemed to think the world should kind of be his way. And he didn't have a whole lot of empathy for the people around him. But in this episode, you see him show empathy for Victor in what he's going through and in his kind of fears that he has at work, because he's still having to go to work every day in a pandemic. And in this episode, he expresses his fears of people not wearing masks while he's delivering to them and things like that. And he has nightmares about it and anxiety himself. And you see Josh dive into that with him and try and make him feel better and not pull it back to himself, which I really appreciated him showing that side of himself, because in the other episodes, like I didn't see that as much. And then you also saw him do that with, and this is a spoiler, but his mom sets him up with a girl and they do a Zoom date which we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But she mentions that she had severe depression. And he's like, well, how do you tell if it's severe? And she's like, you'll know. And he's like, well, I have anxiety. I feel like it's severe. And, I didn't go to work a day. And she's like, well, I didn't go to work for 7 weeks because of how severe this depression was. And so you see him kind of be like, oh, okay, I feel empathy for this person that they went through this. And here I am over here thinking this is severe, which it was severe in his mind. And so there are levels. And yes, it might not be clinically severe, but he felt just as severe as she did, that things were going wrong. So I get his side to that. But you just see him kind of, I think, growing and realizing that other people have struggles and it's not just him. And so I really appreciated him in this episode a lot more than I appreciated him in the others. So
yeah, I loved seeing that growth too, Tara. And I think it's important to point out, like, a lot of times pain is so relative. It's like they tell you, if someone's telling you they're having suicidal thoughts or they're depressed, one of the things that you should never tell them is like, oh, so many other people have it worse than you. Like,
yeah,
that doesn't matter. Like, everything is so relative to the individual, just what they're going through. And for Josh, yeah. So this girl that he's on a Zoom date with, Emily, she went through a medical leave of absence for her severe depression, but he also had a legitimate anxiety attack, was experiencing that. And for him, that was really severe in terms of like what he has ever experienced. I think part of the reason why his character resonates so much with me is I'm the same way he is. I get caught up in my own shit and I get very absorbed in it to where I kind of muffle and just pad everything else. And it doesn't get to me. I'm so focused on working through my own stuff that I become very closed off and forget about what's going on with everybody else, that I can relate to so much with him. So, but I guess where I'm going with this is when you compare those two people, they have very different personalities. They have different things that they experienced, obviously, at different degrees. But I think it was a wake-up call, right? I think the way Emily talked to him was very much like a tough love type of thing. She called him out. And this is stuff that you were saying in the first episode with him, which was like, dude, all of the shit that you're going through is you need to take a look in the mirror because you are at the center of a lot of these things with how the world has treated you back, with what you've put back into the world. And she basically said that to him, which was like a very applaudable moment, I feel like, because that was a huge wake-up call.
Well, and he accepted it well. Like, he didn't turn it back like he had with other people and like, well, no, it's your fault. Like, she wasn't a part of it. She was like an outside person being like, hey, take a look at this, which I think he made it to where he could accept it. And see, oh, okay. But to your point, like, everybody goes through their thing. You don't know what other people are going through. So to me, like, it might seem like the worst thing in the world. And to you, it might not seem like the worst thing in the world, but like, you aren't the one judging, not you in particular, but like the outside person is not the one judging how I feel about what's going on in my life.
Yeah.
And so I think that they did that. And I mean, Emily didn't come at him and be like, hey, mine was worse than yours. She was like, hey, like, I had to take 7 weeks off. So there's a difference. But she didn't say his was any less of a traumatic experience for him, because it wasn't. It was very traumatic for him. And he didn't say that hers was any less traumatic than his. And so I think that they both gave each other their own space to live their truth, but at the same time she held him accountable for, this is your truth, but how much of this did you make for it to be your truth?
Yeah, I love that outsider's perspective that she gave him. But to give Josh more credit, it's like this Zoom date happened after the exchange with him, like between him and Victor. And so
Uh-huh.
he was already starting to open up and get
Growing.
more interested in Victor. And it's like the episode before this was the interaction between him and his dad, when his dad called him
Mm-hmm.
out, like, you know, you forget all of these things. And like, basically it was a come to Jesus moment with his dad too. So I think that conversation also helped Josh get some perspective. But this one in episode 10, it was that stranger's perspective, that outsider that was basically not agreeing with like everything the dad said, but basically helping Josh see the problem that lies within himself, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think because he liked her too, I think it's a different experience if it was just like a random stranger that he didn't like at all
Yeah.
saying these things to him, but it was somebody that like he could see building a relationship. You could tell he could see building that relationship with her. And I think he knew that he had to go into it with a different take and a different, like, being empathetic with her and things like that to make that relationship
Yeah.
start well.
It was so interesting with him being this 35, 40-year-old guy, and his mom sets him up on a Zoom date. And just to give you a little context about who this woman is, her name in the show is Emily, but she's played by actress Jamie Chung, who's an Asian American woman. She's been in all kinds of stuff. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but she's just this Asian American woman. And I'll be honest with you, Tara, I didn't like her personality at first. I thought, I don't know, she was so opposite, where Josh is like so emotional and super like sensitive and into his stuff. She was very objective, logical, practical thinking. And if you even look at the house behind her on the Zoom, like everything is very orderly. Perfect. It's like, whoa. Yeah.
So I find that very amusing because, like, you just said you're like Josh. And I will agree, you are. Like, you're more emotionally in tune with yourself and, like, you know, in your world or whatever. But I feel like I'm more like Emily. And so I find that very funny because we're like, I feel like you can stand me at most times. And I feel the same way about you. So, like, it's one of those things that I feel like we are like the two characters. I'm very logical and very, no, this is the point. This is not the point, you know, care, and things like that. And so it's very interesting, but I think that they can make it. I think that they can make it work, which,
yeah, I wasn't sold on it at first, just because like she couldn't even list a song, Tara, that she liked listening to.
It was a very awkward. I'm not that bad, guys. I can, as you know, list things that I like and whatever, but like it was very awkward at first. Very awkward. And like, oh, how is this gonna go? Like, they're both just kind of staring at each other. And Josh didn't, like, some more back, you know, story. Josh didn't necessarily want to go on this date. He didn't know Emily, so it wasn't like her that he wasn't wanting to like meet or whatever, but he did not want to be set up by his mom. And so there's a part where he's talking to Victor about this, and he thought that he got out of the date when the pandemic hit because he wasn't going to be able to go out with her. And then his mom suggested a Zoom date, and he's like, no, I have to. And so he didn't want to do this. And so it just started out very awkward because I don't think she wanted to either. She was just doing it because her mom wanted her to, you know? And so I think that was some of the standoffishness. Like, she didn't want to get involved. She didn't want to be there. She didn't want to tell him anything about herself, whatever. And he has a very awkward moment where she notices his guitar and he's like, and asks him if he's a musician and stuff. And he's like, well, kind of. And like, I thought about removing that and like all these things. And it was hard. I'm like, I was in that awkward phase where I'm like, I don't want to keep watching this because I feel bad for you right now.
I was cringing watching this exchange because you can tell he's such a deep thinker about every little thing he does. He was just like overthinking it, just like the other episode when you mentioned the conversation between him and Victor, when Victor was like, okay, I think we would like went too narrow there. It's like the same thing with this guitar in the background. Josh is just like, I saw when I opened up Zoom, I saw the guitar in the background. I thought about like taking the guitar out so that he wouldn't ask about it. And he's just like like, this is how he thinks about every little thing. It's like, fuck, no wonder you have such anxiety problems. It's like,
Yeah, you're
it's like,
making
I
a
can relate to
problem
that
out of
so much.
nothing.
Yeah, but then she makes the comment. She's like, well, if you were a real musician, I wouldn't have even like considered dating you. And he was just like offended because like, oh, I guess I'm not a real musician. And then she like catches herself and apologizes. But that was like, it did come off very insensitively, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just the two of them not knowing each other's personalities and feeling each other out.
And she makes another comment later on, and I forgot what it was, but it was very insensitive about like her and her friends had been talking, and the only people taking the pandemic really seriously were middle-aged white people or white men, because they'd never been through hardships, basically, is what she said. Like they'd never had something not go their way, or they were just so used to it. And
white male privilege.
Okay. Yes, there is white male privilege, but like I feel like not every white male in the world has had that and doesn't know. Like, I mean, like he pointed out, he's like, I feel like I know that the world doesn't always turn out my way. Like I've had things not turn out my way. And so I don't know. I think that ended poorly for them. That call did. And then she apologized for it later. But like, I think sometimes there are just things that you say without meaning them the way you say them.
Yep.
And that was one of hers. And I'm like, I feel like you didn't mean to just like hardcore call him out.
Yeah. But because Josh genuinely tries to make an effort. We saw that in the very first episode with the student in his class when he's talking about Sacagawea. He does make an effort to recognize his privilege with being born the way he is. And it's like, I mean, everyone's guilty of saying generalist comments like that at some point or another, but it was just a good learning between the two of them. But this whole concept of the Zoom date, it was just so like, I guess I didn't really think about dating with the pandemic and like how you would do that. And I love seeing it play out on screen.
I don't think I would like Zoom dating. Like, I don't like staring at myself, which is really bothering me on the like YouTube videoing that we're doing right now. But like, I don't like watching myself talk. I don't like watching myself do anything. And so like, I feel like me in a Zoom date would be horrible because I'd be more worried about that. I'd be like Josh, and that would be all I could concentrate on and not be able to like focus.
Yeah, I think you can hide your own picture, but I don't know. I don't know how they had their setup, but it was interesting seeing them talk and talk and talk. And they were like, I'm hungry. Are you hungry? And so it's almost like, oh, are they about to go on a date to a restaurant? And then they're like actually in the kitchen, just like
eating their Chinese takeout or whatever.
Yeah. And then they're like brushing their teeth and they're still on each other's Zoom call. And then they're in bed. And there was definitely some nostalgia happening with just how
I did like how they pulled that back in, like, you know, if you're our age, you know, everything wasn't readily available, so you talked on the phone a lot and you fell asleep on the phone and things like that. And that's what they pulled back in, is that for her cute. It was like what she used to do when she was young and stuff. And it was super cute, and I really liked the way they ended it. I mean, not ended it, but ended the season. So like before they announced that they weren't making a new one, I liked the growth that I saw. I liked that he was going to have another positive thing in his life. And then we found out that they ended it completely. And I think that they could have done so much more with showing that relationship and it developing through pandemic and, you know, the other side of the pandemic, hopefully at some point where we don't have it anymore, whatever. I think that they could have really taken it further.
Yeah, I agree. I was fine with how the last episode ended just because it provided enough closure and growth. So it definitely could have, it felt it could have gone either way with having another season and without having another season. I don't know, like for Victor's character in the very beginning, like Victor, it was such an alarming scene for me because Victor has always been so happy-go-lucky and, you know, positive. And this was the first time I saw Victor, like he felt like to me that he was really, really struggling. Like it was bad from what his normal is that we've seen on the show. So I kind of felt like something bad was going to happen with Victor, is like the vibe that I kept getting. So it's kind of sad not to see what happens with that. And then we don't get the closure with how his mom is and his sister and his father who is an alcoholic, and that's the reason Josh doesn't drink, right? He stays away from
Yeah.
drinks because he
Well,
doesn't
and
want to be like his dad.
you do kind of see a montage of all of those things where I don't remember exactly what that montage was about or why they were showing it, but it was neat to see him interacting with his whole family and kind of I don't know, the positive sides of his relationships with all of them. I think it was kind of him being like, you know what, there are some good things.
Yeah. I that makes me want to circle back on the conversation that Josh and Emily were having on science. And
Mm-hmm.
Josh made
Oh,
a very
yes.
casual comment about scientists tell stories. And she
Mm-hmm.
got kind of very critical of that comment. She was just like, no, it's science, like it's fact, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, what I tell my students is you're constantly gathering evidence and you're testing it, and if you learn other facts and things that disprove it, then it just keeps evolving, and that's just the
Mm-hmm.
story that scientists are saying right now. And he finally got her to agree that that was an acceptable way. Like she had some changes on how he should tell that to students in a way that's not like discounting the merits of science. But I really appreciated that, like the story aspect of it. You know what I mean? Because that's
Yeah,
what we're
yeah.
all doing. We're all telling a story based on
What we
what we
know.
deem facts and yeah, what we
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
And I also like their kind of differing takes on the big picture. And in the episode,
Mm.
there's this big picture at a planetarium or something
In
in their
LA.
hometown. And the big picture it shows a part of the universe. And Mr. Corman goes through that with his class about how huge the universe is. And he asks them, basically how they're feeling about that. And one says it makes him feel very small. And Mr. Corman kind of feels the same way. Like he feels like he's a very small part of the bigger picture. And Emily has an alternate take on that, which is there are small things in the universe that go into making us as humans. And so she's like, we are the biggest part of what makes the world the world. And so she basically, he's feeling small because there's so much out there. There's so many stars, there's so many people, there's so many everything. And she is on the opposite, where she's, I'm important in what I'm doing, and humans in themselves are important, and we're evolution and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting to see, because I can feel both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Me
can
too.
understand that we as a human race are a very small part of our overall universe. But we as a human race, or me as a human, am also so much bigger than other things around. And so it was just very interesting to see those two viewpoints that I hadn't actually thought of before.
Yeah, they definitely represent opposite ends of the spectrum there, with the small and large, and one being on the outside and one being the focus. I don't think it's healthy to live in either area, but I
Mm-mm.
think being able to bounce between both of those, like it could be egotistical to always look at yourself as the center of the universe, but the way that she was talking about it, even though she was trying to ground everything in science, the way she talked about existing and being on a Zoom date with him, like from them being microorganisms,
Mm-hmm.
however eons ago, and now they're doing this. It's very, I don't know. It's just, it could be very self-centered, the way that she was thinking about it. But I think the way to move forward from it is always holding both of those
Mm-hmm.
true. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, I think at the end, so what I love about stories, some stories, is when they come full circle, which this one did for the
Mm-hmm.
season. So you remember in episode 1 where Josh is in the shower and he's like beating
Mm-hmm.
on his chest, and it looks like a red heart basically that he's beat into his chest while he's showering. And then the season closes with him, beating on drums, making music. And it's like there's very subtle differences in the facial expressions that he's making. Like he's in a better place. Like he's like physically worked through some of this anxiety and all this stress. So I appreciated like the full circle aspect of it. And then even like kind of the double meaning of the lyrics of the song he wrote, which is Be Here, which I recently watched a documentary that was Be Here Now, which is essentially, I don't know if you ever watched Spartacus. Did you watch that show?
Mm-hmm.
It was a star show with Andy Whitfield, who died of cancer. It was like awful, who played Spartacus. But there's a documentary starring him and his wife, and it documents his time losing his battle with cancer. And it's all about this idea of living in the present moment and just being here. And so this song at the end of the season and Mr. Corman is just like, be here. I think that's what it was really about. It's just like, get like zoom out and don't take all of these problems so seriously and dwell in them. Just be more present. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like the main message, was just be more present instead of dwelling in the past or worrying about the future, because it creates this depression and this anxiety. And I loved it. Yeah.
You also see the full circle with him and his class, because the beginning episode, you see the one little kid and his question about luck. And the one little kid raised his hand that he felt lucky, but he's the same kid that raised his hand that felt like, you know, the big picture makes him feel small. And he's the one struggling, you know, with feeling small in his life. And so he felt lucky, but he also felt small. And it was like kind of a full circle.
Yeah, that was such a powerful scene when he's just having this lecture and you see his screen of all their little faces on a Zoom call, and he's asking them to raise their hand if whatever. And like the vast majority of them are not participating, like raising their hand one way or another. Yeah.
That's real life. If you were home with your kid during classes, nobody like, you felt for that little kid, because you're like, why do you feel so small?
Well, okay. I don't know if you've seen Melancholia with Kirsten Dunst. It's a very existential movie about the end of the world.
Imagine that.
And she has a sister, I believe, and the sisters have very different reactions to the end of the world. So Kirsten Dunst's character, she is like suffering in real world society like we have. She is just having all kinds of issues. But then the end of the world happens, and she's the one out of everyone that she knows who is handling it like the healthiest, who is able to process it in a healthy way. And it was kind of the same thing with that kid, right? He had like this optimistic outlook on everything, and then the world went to shit, and he's like really struggling and feels small. And yeah, that was such a powerful scene.
Yep. But you also get to see Mr. Corman, which is something I mentioned in our old episode. You get to see him in his element. Like, he is so good with those kids. Like, he's so good at pulling them in and getting them. I know we said that they weren't really involved, but they were all paying attention, and I don't know, he was trying to make it fun for them and make it a lesson.
He was trying. He learned so many lessons throughout this with talking to his dad and talking to Emily, and I was very proud of the growth that he exhibited. But it's like switching gears to the show not being renewed. I mean, what do you think that says about what people prefer?
So I want to go the positive route in this and think that there have been a lot of shows that were very popular that got canceled. And I know I keep throwing Veronica Mars in episodes, but Veronica Mars was a very popular show, and it got canceled because of a combining or whatever. I don't know what UPN and WB did at that time, but they became one. And so it got canceled. So I'm hoping that it's something like that, and it's not because people weren't watching it or enjoying it or trying to take the lessons out of it that I think it was trying to show. That's me trying to like be optimistic about this. But also I think it was that people are living that right now, and maybe they didn't want to, I don't know, live it on TV too. They wanted to be more fun and
Yeah, in true Story Darlings podcast fashion, I'm going to take the opposite stance, and I don't want to say it's negative, right? I don't want to like connect this with negativity. Maybe not even pessimism, really, but anyway, this is my stance on it. And maybe it's because I've been reading Infinite Jest, which is a very critical take on society and them just pacifying themselves with amusements and entertainment instead of facing problems, and actually connecting with other human beings.
And if that's what you're saying, I kind of agreed with you. So it's not an alternate, like, I want to believe the best in people, but I also think that like people just wanted to have more fun.
Yeah.
So
I agree that people are wanting to have more fun and they're not wanting to see something on screen that they're living in day-to-day life. But it also comes back to, I think some of the themes that the show touches on, they're so important to face and like recognize about yourself and the people around you. And I think I was reading somewhere where it was like a ratings thing. There weren't a lot of people tuning into the show. It wasn't really popular. And so I'm trying not to be negative and saying that, greater society is just like not into thinking at length about these types of issues and they want to ignore them and that kind of thing instead of facing them. But I think, I don't know, it's like a small part of me thinks that that's what's happening. It's not like no one is denying these problems exist, but they tend to avoid them. And
there's still a stigma around like mental health and mental health awareness and things like that. So I think there is still that, like, any generations older than ours would just be like, no, dude, stop whining and move on. Whereas I think our generation and the generation below us want to,
especially
they're starting to want to like acknowledge these things. And
I hope it's able to make a comeback in some way, shape, or form, because I think it's so important, like the things that it's trying to talk about and bring awareness to.
It's a real take on that.
It was a real opportunity to get these things out there and to get people talking about them, but
in an authentic way. And not just like, you see a lot of movies that mention them or whatever, but they don't like really go into what that means. They're like, oh yeah, they had depression. Well, like, okay, they were sad. That's what you're basically saying in this movie, and that's not what that is. And so it was a real take, and I don't know, it may have been uncomfortable for a lot of people.
It's hard facing these truths about human condition.
It's also hard acknowledging that maybe you had that if you aren't one of the I don't know, generations that were allowed to do that as well, like or from a family that allowed it, or whatever the like block was. There are multiple different ways that it's blocked in people, that they aren't allowed to feel that way.
Well, that, and I think it's a hard thing for people to swallow when they're seeing characters, play out interactions on screen, like with Josh and Dax earlier, which those are interactions. They're so common. Like people act like that all the time. They'll send a text and reach out to someone because they need something that they haven't talked to in forever. And I think everybody's guilty of that. And it's just watching things like that play out. It's a hard thing to swallow and acknowledge that, okay, I could do a better job at like being a better person and empathizing and relating to other people,
and that's the impact you're having on them. I think that's the harder side. Like, it's okay, like I will be like, oh, okay, maybe I wasn't doing the best I could, but like seeing that other person's side and seeing the damage maybe that you were doing to them, I think it's hard too.
So I don't know, I'm sad that the show isn't being renewed. I think it is a loss because it was just another platform, another channel to bring awareness to this type of thing. But I think overall, we are moving the right direction. Like you mentioned, generationally speaking, our generation, and especially the one, after us, they're super interested in these things. And I think it'll improve and get better. It's a shame to me because I really appreciated the show, and I had to talk about it with you.
So I think we're ending this one on a much more, we're on the same point
Yeah.
on this one than we were on the last episode that we had, where I was completely not on Josh's side. And
Which
you
is
were
okay.
fully on
Yeah.
his side. And now we've kind of like, after talking, we can see him as a full person and not just,
Yep.
here's my take on him. I don't know. I'm liking that, he grew, which eliminated some of my faults with him.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important too. Like, one of the other messages in the wrap up of this series was finish things. Emily was like, you don't finish things. She just straight out called him out on it. And it was true. I mean, it was basically like the relationship with Megan. And she was just like, you didn't, finish this music thing with me. We didn't have a discussion, like none of that. And so I think this whole creativity aspect of it is super important too. Like, if there's some passion that you've been wanting to do, whether it's painting, writing, making music,
doing a podcast.
Thank you. See, I'm the person that doesn't finish things. And you, like I said, you crack that whip. This has been fun. Like, I've been getting a lot of value out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we can take value in pretty much everything we do, as long as you find a reason for you to do it.
Growth. It's all about growth as a person.
I will admit that I did like this series. I'm not completely negative on it. I know last episode I was a little harsh on Josh. I really love Victor though, but I think there's a lot of worth in it. A lot of good things that we do as a society need to be looking into and exploring and realizing we do. Because I think there are a lot of Joshes out there. There are a lot of Emilys. There are a lot of Victors. And there's not a whole lot of understanding of each other.
That makes me happy. I'm glad you came around to it and loved it. Yeah.
Do you want to do the call outs for socials?
Oh yeah. Wait, we're trying to be better about remembering self-promotion stuff. So if you want to tweet at us or connect with us over social media, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Our handle is at Story Darlings, literally on everything. You can email us at storydarlings@gmail.com. And we would love to hear from you. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to drop a rating or a review if you feel so inclined.
Tell us who you not sided with, because that sounds like a little bit of a negative thing, but like which character you felt connected to the most. Like, are you a Josh? Are you a Victor? Are you an Emily?
I love that. Yeah. So with that said, we always tie it back. I think we'll just relink what we shared with the very first episode for the Mr. Corman thing, just because it's important to keep talking about this and educating and bringing awareness. So I'll link to that in the show notes. So thank you guys for listening to us.
Have a great week. Bye.
See you next week. Bye.